Welcome to the D.E.A.D podcast. D.E.A.D stands for Desi and Emmy's Abnormal Discoveries, where we discuss all things spooky and weird. I'm Desi,
And I'm Emmy.
and today we'll be talking about Mexican folklore, part 1, La Llorona. Let's get started. All right. Hey, Emmy, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Mercury's about to go retrograde tomorrow and then full moon the next day. So it's a little chaotic, but
A lot chaotic.
it's a lot chaotic. We're going to get through it.
You got to do
How are
something
you doing?
about that.
I'm trying to tell the planets to calm down, but I can't. They won't listen to me.
You need to. You need to tell them something because I've had enough.
Okay. They're too powerful. I can't.
We'll work on that. Have you watched any scary movies this week?
Just Riverdale. Riverdale's been getting creepier and creepier every season. So
Well, that does count because you're going to
Yeah.
mention them. I watched, it was called Pure on Hulu.
Yep.
And apparently it's part of a series, but it's like a movie series. And this one was kind of like religious slash witchy slash demonic slash I don't know what, but it was pretty good. I thought it was
all of our favorite
interesting.
things
Yeah,
here
I
at the
was
D.E.A.D
like,
podcast.
I thought it was very interesting. I'm glad Olympia recommended that. I was like, I want to watch it now.
I'm gonna check it out, but probably not tonight because I'll be too scared after this episode. So I'll probably have to check it out like during the
You
day.
didn't
this
even
weekend.
watch La Llorona, so
I did not. My homework was to watch La Llorona, and nope, failed. Kind of ran out
Still
of
need to watch
time.
it.
Kind of also was not feeling it.
Yeah,
Was
you do have to
not,
watch it at some
prepared.
point. I feel like you'd really
Yes.
like the funny part. That's mainly what I want. And I feel like there's a lot of parts in that where I think that you will find so funny.
So I need to have my nieces over and watch it with them. They like scary
Mhm.
movies too, and they'll laugh with me and make it so
Yeah.
I'm not as scared. If I watch it by myself in the dark and then take Joey out, it's not gonna go well.
What spooky shirt are you wearing today?
My spooky shirt is again a band t-shirt, and it's
I
not
can see that.
really that spooky, but it is Guns N' Roses. It was my sister's shirt, actually, like from the 80s, so
Oh, really?
pretty vintage. But it's it's got all
Cool.
the band members with skulls on their faces.
Oh,
So
I like
it's got-
that.
there's more dudes down here.
Is
Yeah.
there a skull in the middle, or what's in the middle?
That's
right in
the
the middle.
Guns N' Roses, like the album cover. It's a gold,
Oh.
kind of like a record, and then there's two guns pointing out with
Oh,
roses
okay.
wrapped around the guns. My spooky shirts are all band related, apparently. That's what I'm
Clearly.
discovering.
They're not so spooky.
So tell me about yours. I see
I am
Freddy Krueger
wearing-
peeking at me.
Yes, I am wearing a Freddy Krueger men's t-shirt that I cut, and it is from A Nightmare on Elm Street, the third one. It's not my favorite, but I love Freddy Krueger, so
Had to have it.
that's why I bought it. I'm like, well, I don't have this one, so I gotta have it. What are you drinking tonight?
I am drinking, meant to leave it open because I don't know the name of it, Divided Sky Rye IPA. It's a local St. Louis brewery
Ooh.
called Four Hands Brewery.
Have you been there?
There was one vacation recently where we just visited as many breweries as we could. So I want to say yes, but there's a couple we didn't hit. So I'm not positive.
Do you have a lot of breweries in St. Louis?
Oh yeah.
Oh, really?
That's like the only thing we're known for, like, is pretty much beer. It's like if there's anything special about us, I'd say it's beer. Because there's
Yeah.
like the big Anheuser-Busch brewery, and yeah, there's a lot. So like I said, I still haven't even seen them all. On vacation, we went to one every
Wow.
day, and I still
Yeah.
There's one near my house now that I need to go to.
Oh, I am drinking
Oh, yeah.
another one of the Cayman Jack from last week, but this one is the Cuban Mojito. I'll be drinking that tonight. All right. Okay, so tonight we're going to be discussing La Llorona. Emmy, have you ever heard of La Llorona before?
So no, not until you brought her up. I think it was when you listened to Astonishing Legends you brought her up, but yeah, I just remember I was like, I don't even know what that is. Like what? And of course, I'm like saying it at first, and I'm like La Lorna or La Llorona, and you're like, what did you just say? Like no. So we've worked on me trying to say it correctly. So
Yes.
apologies in advance if I sound a little goofy.
Yeah.
But
Well, I remember telling you how excited I was when I was listening to an episode and they mentioned that they were going to talk about her, and you're like, who?
I'm like, who is that?
I was like, excuse me? How do you not know who La Llorona is? How have you not seen the movie?
Yeah, haven't seen the movie, didn't even know of the movie. Even doing some of this research, I feel like she hangs out down in Texas or south. So, south and by
everywhere.
water. But I know she can be. Yeah, that kind of brings me to just something I really want to stress, of course, because I'm a big chicken and I get scared, but also beyond just getting scared, I think it's important to pay respects to the dead and to honor them and to not disrespect their name. So I don't want to just be like, ooh, I'm just going to tell all these stories like she was some horrible, scary demon witch and blah blah blah. Like I'm not trying to disrespect. Like I'm coming from a place of, and I kind of just want to carry on her story and just mention a couple versions of the story that resonated with me and maybe talk about why. And I know you're doing the same thing, talking about some of the stories that you found interesting. I lit a candle tonight, pulled some cards, said a little prayer before this. So just making that known that we are not here to disrespect.
So no one will come for him.
No one come for me. And if I say her name wrong, I'm sorry.
You're doing
Don't come
great.
at me. I'm trying.
Yep.
So I don't know if you want to get in. Do you want to just hop into your research?
Sounds good. And I found that there's just a lot of versions of her. I feel like some of them are like worse than others. But so like the first one, La Llorona, or in English, she's called the Weeping Woman. And in most of these stories, she goes by Maria. I don't know if that was actually her name, but all the stories pretty much mention her as Maria. And so this one version, she was poor and she captured the attention of all the men in her small town in Mexico, whether they're rich or poor or whatever. She was beautiful, and she would wear a white gown, and she would spend her evenings out with men and go around with them. But she had two small sons, and I feel like a lot of times she had two boys. I don't know how accurate that is, but that's what this story mentioned, which made it difficult for her to go out at night, obviously. And so a lot of times she would leave them alone. One day, her sons were found drowned in the river. A lot of the people said different things. One of them, some people would say that like they wandered off because obviously they were left alone. Maybe they went to go find her. Maybe they went to go play, or I don't know. But so they wandered off and they drowned since they were alone. But then others would say that she drowned them so that she could live freely and be able to go out every night with men.
Get the men. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So that's the first version I have. Do you have any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I'm writing them all down.
Okay.
Which is not helping for a podcast platform. You probably need to hear what I'm thinking.
I'm really working on my mind reading and my psychic ability.
I'm just gonna write it down and keep it to myself. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because that I did see something similar. So her being a poor woman, I did get some of that from the stories I researched. But yeah, there's been different questions on like what happened to her kids. It's clear that as the weeping woman, she's always running around crying and she's just filled with grief. It's related to her children dying, and there's water involved. But it's like, yeah, people blame her, like she killed her children. Or did someone else kill her children? Or did something happen to them because they were neglected? Like that's something interesting I didn't hear in my research was the idea that she just left them at home alone and they wandered in the river and just were messing around as kids and something happened.
Right.
Like I didn't hear that as an option, but that's definitely interesting. And regardless, very sad. Like
it is very sad.
Even I guess that's kind of what I was starting to write too, is like even if she did it, it's just very sad you got to be having some mental health issues that like we know about these days, but they might not have known about, which is sad. It's like no one was there for her to help her with these kids, and whatever, if they drove her to do it or if someone else did it, it's definitely intense. So that's just my thoughts on that first.
Yeah, no, definitely. This second version it says that she was a very caring woman who did marry a wealthy man. She actually got married, and she ended up having two sons. Also, again, with the two sons.
Yeah.
And after giving birth, apparently her husband began to change, and he began to drink, and he started cheating on her, and he would leave for months at a time. He would even talk, I don't know if he was talking to her and like being mean and telling her stuff, but it said that he would talk to her about leaving her to marry a rich woman. So he left, and he would return only to only to visit the children, which upset her again, Maria. I mentioned her name, Maria, and she began to resent her son because he only came for them and didn't pay any attention to her. One day, it said that she was walking with her children near the river, and her husband showed up in a carriage with another woman, and he stopped and he visited with the children, and he completely ignored Maria again, and then he just drove away. Not didn't wave, nothing. And so after this, she went into a rage. Like, this just made her so mad. And she turned on the children and she threw them into the river. As soon as she had thrown them in, she regretted it and she ran to try to save them, but obviously it was too late. It says that she was just inconsolable and she ran down the street screaming and crying for them, and she mourned them day and night, and she wouldn't eat, and she would just walk along the river in her white gown searching for her boys. And as the days grew longer, she grew thinner and thinner because she didn't want to eat. And somehow, the thinner she got, the taller she got. And she looked like a skeleton. That's what this story said. Until finally she died along the riverbank. And people said that after her death, that her spirit would appear along the riverbanks whenever it would get dark. And everyone was afraid to go outside on the shoreline of the river and just floating in her white dress that she died in, and she would just cry. And a lot of people they never spoke of her as Maria. They started calling her La Llorona because she would just cry, and children were warned not to go outside in the dark because La Llorona would catch them and throw them in the river. So none of the kids wanted to go outside because of that.
Yes. And that's what when I was researching some stuff, I saw that where it's like she is like the boogie woman, where it's like, tell your kids, like, don't get too close to the water. La Llorona might come out. Like, she's used for
Intimidation.
the intimidation factor. Yeah.
Yes.
It's like
And I don't know how you were raised.
I was more scared of humans, I guess. Those were the scare tactic, I guess, or abandonment. But
since you mentioned the boogeyman, like the female boogeyman, this one that I clipped, it's not a story, but it just talks about the story of her, and that she's told, which we were just discussing, she's told to scare children into good behavior. This one says specifically to deter children from playing near dangerous water, which that would make sense.
Right.
And it says also that her cries are heard as she walks near bodies of water to scare children from wandering around, resembling the stories of El Cucuy. Very similar to
Segue.
the Cucuy. Yes, very similar. And also, it says that she is linked to a word that I cannot say. Nunasis? I don't know.
Oh.
But apparently it's a mythological creature with a cry similar to that of a newborn baby. That's crazy.
Well, and one of the things I researched that I wasn't going to mention, because again, I can't say it either, but there's an Aztec goddess that she's often related to as well. It's the goddess of childbirth, and how there's a lot related to childbirth. So it's not just little kids, it's like newborn babies as well. She's can go after them too. But also, like, I don't know, I like to think of goddesses as another way to connect to protection, just like goddesses, like,
right.
I feel protected by them. So I feel like there's also a side that it could be that she's protecting children and cares for them. But of course, that's like the myth of La Llorona is that she's evil and kills children.
Right.
And so it's like, what's the case? Like, is she not? Are we just afraid because there's a crying woman and we can't handle women's emotions and that scares us? So we're like, oh, there's a lady crying. Like, be afraid. Be very afraid.
Right.
Like, maybe she's just sad. But I don't know. I just find it all like interesting. It's also interesting that the three versions you brought up are pretty different from the two versions I came up with, and they're different from each other.
Yeah.
That there's so many. There's so many opinions.
There is.
It's kind of like you can pick and choose which one, but again, that also doesn't sit well with me because I don't want to be like, well, this is the story and this is what happened when you don't really know what happened. Like, I don't know her life. I don't want to sit there and like scare children into doing something because, this was her life, but we don't even know if that was her life, or like, it's just interesting how stories change I mean, from culture to culture and just over
Mm.
time.
And especially like how everyone knows about her, like in the Hispanic culture, because like I asked my mom, I asked my grandma, and they know of her. But I'm like, what's her like? What's the
Yeah.
story? What's the
Mhm.
version that you know? And neither one of them could really remember. They
Yeah.
just know that she cries along a body of water for her children. Like that
Yes.
was the gist of it. There wasn't like how she died. Some like yeah, they knew she lost her children. Don't know she did it. Someone else did it. Like nothing. They just know.
She's out there. Don't mess
Yep.
around near some water, and that's fine. And maybe it's meant to be that way. Like, we're not meant to know her story and know which one's right. Like, we could do
Right.
research all day long, and we're never going to know which one's right. Like, you just kind of pick one and be like, this is what I think.
Right. Well, also I feel like I mean she could have been made up, but also it nowadays. So the story is very plausible. And like you mentioned, mental
Hmm.
health. There are so many true crime stories of women killing their children.
Yeah,
There just is. There is a I mean I can sit here and name several of them right off the top of my head.
totally.
So the story in general for her is plausible. At some
Yeah.
point somewhere in Mexico that could have happened. I mean, I feel like everyone can agree on that
Yeah.
and regretted it later at some point.
Someone
That
could have made the
story in
story
general,
off of that, like knowing that
yes,
happened. And then,
yes. Especially back then, we don't even have the. I mean, now it's not that much better, but especially in Mexico, no mental health help
yeah.
for women if they have children out of wedlock.
Hmm.
Especially if it's that old,
Yeah.
if it's that old of a story. If this is a story that like my grandma's mom would tell her, or this goes back, especially back then, there was nothing.
Well, and that's why, so maybe I can tell the women who run with the wolves story now. It's similar to version two that you brought up, but there's a little bit of a difference in the way that, like the reason, I guess the reason
Okay.
she kills her children, I think is a little different. So in Women Who Run with the Wolves, Clarissa Pincola Estes tells a story, and she kind of so it's myths and stories of the wild woman archetype. So she just kind of pulls from different stories throughout history and talks about the wild woman and how to connect with the wild woman within. And I took a whole class on it and read it as a book club. So it's very, very powerful book for sure, but also kind of like poetic in a way. And some of the stories, it's like the things we call her CPE, Clarissa Pinkola
Hmm.
as the CPE. It's easier. But it's like the things CPE pulls from these stories. It's like, wow, like how did you get there with this? So I'm not going to go into the details of what she pulled out of this and how that relates
Hmm.
to wild women, but it is interesting what you're saying about how women were treated and how there was no
Hmm.
help and how you can very easily lose your mind when you have two screaming sons
Hmm.
just messing around. Like, that makes sense. Okay, so I'm going to read the part. Okay, so she says, a rich hidalgo nobleman courts a beautiful but poor woman and wins her affections. She bears him two sons, but he deigns not to marry her. One day he announces that he's returning to Spain, where he will marry a rich woman chosen by his family, and that he will take his sons with him. The young woman is crazed and acts in the manner of the great shrieking mad woman throughout time. She claws his face, she claws her own face, she tears at him, she tears at herself. She picks up the two small sons and runs to the river with them, and there throws them into the torrent. The children drown, and La Llorona falls to the river bank in grief and dies. The hidalgo returns to Spain and marries the rich woman. The soul of La Llorona ascends to heaven. There the master of the gate tells her she may come to heaven, for she has suffered, but that she may not enter until she recovers the souls of her children from the river. And that is why it is said today that La Llorona, the weeping woman, sweeps the river banks with her long hair, puts her long stick fingers into the water, and drags the bottom for her children. It's also why living children must not go near the river after dark, for La Llorona may mistake them for her own children and take them away forever. What's interesting about this one is just kind of the reason. So yours in the second version that you said, the reason she kills the sons is because when he came back, he was visiting them and he was giving them all of his
Hmm.
attention and wasn't giving her attention. And in this story, it's like, no, she kills them because he was going to take them away from her. So I guess it's like you can't take my sons. Like, I won't
Mhm.
let you have them. Like, that, I would rather they die than you take them away from me. So
Mhm.
she kills them, and then she suffers because it's like, oh no, what have I done? Kind of thing. And it's interesting about the heaven portion too, where it's like she has to go back and she has to find her kids. So that's part of why. So that's an interesting, I guess, little
That is interesting.
extra part to that. I feel like I don't know why that feels better to me. That, like, the one with the attention, where it's like, oh, she killed them because
Mhm.
she wasn't getting attention. But it's like I could see, I don't know, but then I still can't see killing your children. I just can't. Like, I try to make it make sense,
Well,
but it's
yeah.
like, no, it's like this is a sad story. It's scary. It's messed up. It's like scary that to think that as humans we can get to that point where we go so insane and so crazy that we do
Mhm.
something like that. But so then Riverdale,
You want to get on
Riverdale.
that?
Yes, ma'am. For those of you who know, Riverdale is just a weird show. I love it, but it has nothing to do with like horror and La Llorona. But of course, in this last episode, they did an episode on ghost stories and brought in La Llorona. I'm like, okay, cool, we're doing this. I'll just read what she says in the episode. And her name is not Maria in this. So she
Okay.
says, my name was Martha Mallon. My employ was as a nurse in the children's ward of Rivervale's first hospital. In those early, hungry years, we lost many a babe from the pox, from the bitter cold, from a doctor's careless hands. The townsfolk blamed me for the loss of their children, accused me of being a witch woman, and they dragged me and my own children to the Sweetwater River, weighed us down with rocks, and threw us in the dark waters. We drowned, and I became the cursed thing that I am. Her story in this is like she was murdered along with her children, and she still goes around the water and tries to find them because she
Mhm.
was, I guess, separated from them in the afterlife. But it's like she was killed because she was accused of being a witch and killing other kids at the hospital she worked at, when really it's
Mhm.
like they just died from natural causes and she was not a witch. So you're kind of made to feel bad for her in this story. So it's like she didn't kill her kids. Now she is coming
Right.
after other people's children because
Mhm.
she can't find her kids, and she's like, well, I
Right.
gotta have a kid. So
Right.
she's
Well,
like
I feel like
takes other
she's trying to
people's children.
replace them, like in that kind of
Yes. I mean, she had like a black veil over her
veil.
head
Mhm.
and just was, I mean, she was wet. It's like everywhere she walked, there was water everywhere. And
Right.
yeah, but she wore black. And that's something that was interesting. I looked at a lot of research on what she was wearing because there's other cultures too that have a version of a white woman or like wears a woman
Mhm.
who wears white clothes that
Yes.
haunt things. And they kind of relate it to
Right.
La Llorona. And it's like, is it the same? Is it different? Whatever. Yeah.
Well, it's like the episode of Resurrection Mary, Maria. That's why she came up in that episode because it was a
Hmm.
version of a woman in white.
Yeah, and this, it was different. So it was interesting. I don't know if you want to get into this part yet, but I know
Mhm.
you were telling me about your dream that you had.
When you watch that, I hadn't had my dream yet. Because remember when we tried to interpret my dream, we couldn't find anything about her wearing black, which is weird because until I started actually researching La Llorona, like nothing else, no dream, nothing about the movie. It wasn't until I just searched La Llorona and started reading into stuff, the different versions and the different dresses of her came into play, which I thought was interesting. I was like,
Hmm.
I should have just done that. Then maybe I would have found. But yeah, I want to get into that. Okay, so this little snippet, it's really just to scare you.
Thank
And
you.
then we'll go into my dream. But I just wanted to read this to you because you were like, she always goes after kids.
Oh, fuck.
So this one says, it's just really short, but it says, though the legends vary, the apparition is said to act without hesitation or mercy. Tales of her cruelty depends on the version of the legend you hear. Some say that
I don't want to hear this one.
she kills indiscriminately, taking men, women, and children, whoever is foolish enough to get close enough to her. Others say she is very barbaric and kills only children, dragging them screaming to a watery grave. Yeah.
But I was thinking that because in Riverdale she tried to drown a kid in the bathtub and then or something else with water. It's like the water's everywhere, but it could be in the
Mhm.
house. Like she'll get in houses. It's not like you're just sitting by a lake. I just need open space, but not cornfields because I'm afraid of like signs and aliens. So
I know I'm dying for them to plant corn so I can send y'all videos
I
of what
can't
it looks
wait.
like at night.
Yes.
Like I love it. One time my friend, I think I told you the story, but yeah, my friend was here dropping something off. It was when they were growing corn, but this was during the day. And she like looked to the back and she goes, "That's creepy." And I was like, "Oh my God, you should see it at night." I was all excited to tell her. She was like,
Like, it is
"No, you're
creepy.
crazy."
Yeah, but you like that it's creepy. Like,
Me
so I go,
personally?
yes, I'm asking you. So,
Oh, okay.
like, I'll go down to the basement and then I'll like hear a noise, the house creaked, and then I get scared and
Mhm.
then I run up the stairs. Do you ever have moments like that? And if you do you just laugh at yourself? Like, do you find it funny? Because it seems like you're not, it's not that you don't get scared.
You're just saying like, do I get scared? I mean, sometimes I get scared and I'll just go like, "Oh, I heard a noise." I'll just go and I'll go check it out. But I mean, for the most part, I don't know. I just don't.
Just don't.
Really good horror movies, like for them to be like on my top list is because they scared me. That's the criteria. But
Yeah.
like that's not your favorite scary movie.
No, but it is one of my favorite just movies, Freddy. Like, I like those movies, and I find that more scary than Jason because like it's scary that you can't even go to sleep. Like, he
Mhm.
can haunt your dreams,
Yes.
your nightmares. He hops in. Like, you can't go to sleep.
Yes.
Jason, it's like, just don't go to a cabin in the woods near a lake. Like, that's fine. Like, La Llorona, like, stay away from water.
Could find
Oh, what if they find each other? See, okay, so this could be good. So instead of like a scary ending, let's just end on La Llorona and Jason Voorhees meet by the lake. They fall in love. They have their own little babies. So she doesn't have to look for anybody else's babies because she just has little babies with hockey masks. They don't want to haunt people anymore because they're happy. That's all. The end. You don't know that.
at all.
Not with that attitude.
But you like definitely took it a different way. That's not what I was saying. No, I meant like, yeah.
They'll realize they're both really strong and
But I don't know. I just don't get scared. If I get scared, I have like a high. Like I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that's so cool." Like when we talked about the Sally House, the EVPs, and I told you there was other episodes that were scarier that actually did scare me. Well, like how it made me feel. It was hard to explain.
like, we can talk about this and like, I'm not gonna be murdered tonight in my backyard. Or I might. And if I do, then
you will not be.
I went out with a bang.
Then I will have to come and murder somebody, and then I'm gonna
you
be in
do-
jail. And
Well, yeah, but like, throw out an episode first. So like, do an episode on my life and what happened to me, and then like why you did what you
What
did, and then go to
happened to
jail. So we can end with like, wow, this podcast
on a high
is
note,
really
right?
cool. Yeah, end on a high note.
I love how that's your process of thinking. We gotta get an episode on it. Oh my God.
Priorities.
Episode first, murder after.
Episode first,
Got it.
murder after. That's what we should have called our podcast. Name of the episode.
Hilarious. Okay, so the two other stories that I have, I want to, before I start them, I want to talk about my dream that I had first. So, how long ago was this, Emmy? 2 weeks ago? 3 weeks ago?
No,
Longer?
I feel like it's been a minute.
Yeah?
I also feel like we should be in the year 2025 at this point because time is flying. So I don't know. I
for
would
sure.
say longer than, I would say about a month ago, because
Okay.
we started that dream thing on Pinterest. We started a dream board.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that was when it was. I guess it doesn't really matter, but it was before we
Right.
decided to do this episode.
Oh, yeah, it was.
Yeah.
So I had a dream, and let me preface this by saying I did not watch anything scary. I did not watch La Llorona. We weren't even talking about La Llorona. I mean, I know we've mentioned her because of Resurrection Mary. Like that was
We didn't do any
months
research or anything
ago.
on her. Yeah.
No.
And even then you just mentioned it and I was like, who's that? And then
Yeah.
we barely.
And then, I think I remember us talking about it maybe back in April. Like
Yeah.
it
Wow.
had been a long time. So nothing. And I'm not like Emmy, like I don't normally have nightmares. It's probably been a year, 2 years, 3 years since I've had a nightmare. I can't even remember the last time I had a nightmare. This night I was asleep, obviously. And in my dream, it seemed like I was in some kind of cabin and it was dark. And at some point I went outside on like a patio or a deck or something. And there was a chair and I had this old clay vase. Emmy thinks it was an urn. I'm not too sure. But I feel like it wasn't an urn. I don't know. But this old clay vase urn looking thing.
Pot
and
thing.
There was powder. There was powder in it. I didn't dump it anywhere. No, I didn't say white powder. Did not say white powder. You see how Emmy went straight to that? Didn't even say white powder. Didn't even say the color.
Well, if it was gray, it was a dead body. If it was white, cocaine.
So there was some kind of like powder substance in there because I know it was filled to the top. And I remember not dumping the whole thing, but I grabbed some off the top and like was sprinkling it around. And I don't know what I was doing, but I just know it was dark. And all of a sudden, something comes towards me, and I didn't see what or who it was until it was in front of me. And I just caught a glimpse of her face, and she grabbed my forearm, right? My forearm, and her hand went across my forearm, and I immediately and I woke up. And as soon as I woke up, like it was like a split second. As soon as I woke up, I was so scared, and I could still feel the hand on my arm.
That's so creepy.
Yeah. And I don't know if it had to do with me laying on my back, but I was laying on my back, and I don't know if I had my arms, I don't know. And when I woke up, I don't know why I immediately thought it was La Llorona. Like that was my immediate thought. And she was wearing black. This is the thing too. She was not wearing white. She was wearing black. She had a veil on, and her face just showed for a split second, and she had long, skinny fingers, and that they grabbed my arm,
For
and I
skimming the bottoms of lakes.
Yes, exactly, like you read. Me and Emmy tried to do research because we couldn't find anything on her wearing black, and it only said she wore white. And I'm like, well, why is she wearing black? Like, is there a version that she wears black? Why? I'm like, I
Yeah.
know it was her. I woke up and immediately
You
knew
had a feeling about
it
her.
was like
Yeah.
immediately. And I wish I could remember every single detail, because I did remember as soon as I woke up. Now I don't remember what time it was. I wish I would have checked the time, because I like
That
to
time.
know like that kind of stuff. Yes. But so that was interesting. And then it was, do you remember how much later it was when I had that random encounter at Half Price Books?
Oh my God, no. But I forgot
okay.
about that. Okay. Yes, you have to tell that story too.
Yes, I just remembered that, so I want to talk about that too.
Yes.
So this was later, maybe a week or so later. I had an encounter. I went into Half Price Books, went looking for ghost books. I like to go to the Texas section first and see if there's any specific to Texas ghost books. So I did that. There's nothing. So I went to it's a small little section. So the section where they have like the paranormal ghost stuff, it's like a little half square. It's ghost, paranormal, UFOs, tarot. I think it has some religion stuff. It's all in one. So just the section that's about ghosts is like one shelf. Like anything lower is like UFOs, anything higher is like tarot and something else. And I'm like, I just want ghosts. So I go in there, and when I go into that little section, there's a girl there, and I don't pay any mind. Like, I'm not big on talking to people, and I'm not the kind to like start a conversation. So I'm like, oh great, there's a person in this tiny little spot that I want to look in. So I start looking, and I'm like seeing if they got any new books. And she comes in front of me, and she wants to grab a book, and she's like, oh, I'm sorry. And she like grabs a book and then takes it. Fine, whatever. And I'm like trying to like not pay attention to her. She's randomly, the first thing that comes out of her mouth is, do you believe in this stuff? I was like, that's a long question to like, I don't have time
It's
to
a deep question. Like, what do you mean?
Yes, exactly. And I'm like, I don't know, maybe I'm have to see it to believe it type of person. So I don't really know. And so she's like, well, you're interested in this stuff. And then I'm scanning through the books, and I come across a book, and she sees, because she's standing right next to me, and she's like, oh, do you watch that show? Or she's like, they're real. And it was like some ghost hunter people on TV. And I was like, really? I was like, I don't know about those shows. And so she starts talking about that. They do this. She's like, it's really interesting. You should check them out. And I was like, okay, cool. And then she was like, and then they randomly, I'm half listening to her. I'm literally half-assed listening to her. I'm being honest. Like, I just want her to stop talking to me. Like, I do not want to have a conversation with a weird girl in a bookstore. And so then all I picked up from the sentence she was saying was La Llorona. And I stopped, and I was like, where was this at? Like, when did they talk about this episode, or when did they talk about this? Where was it? And she mentioned it was like across, like not in the United States. It was somewhere else. She's like, yeah, you should check it out. And I was like, wow, La Llorona. I've never seen that on TV, like on a ghost hunter show. So right there and then, and I didn't even put anything together when she said it. She said the name, and I was like, oh wow. And then she goes on by saying, like, well, you have to believe in something, or you have to something if you're here looking at this stuff. Like, she's like, this tells me that you do believe it, or you have
You
some.
don't know my life. Maybe I'm out here trying to debunk all these ghost stories, and maybe I'm the biggest skeptic in the world, and I'm doing research to prove that it isn't true.
Exactly. And so I was like, okay. And so she goes on. She's like, yeah, you should really check them out. And I'm like, okay. And then I leave because I didn't find anything. It was that small section. And so she leaves, and I leave. And I'm like waiting for her to leave the bookstore because at that point I was done. So because I didn't want her to talk to me outside the store. Didn't think of anything about it. Thought of what I told Emmy. I'm like, oh my gosh, like these people coming up, this person coming up to me. And I was telling her about something else, about how I was weirded out. It wasn't even the La Llorona thing. But then when I realized, that's when I was like, oh my gosh, Emmy, like this is all connected. Like I just had a dream. Like out of all the urban legends, out of all the ghost stories, out of all the possible scenarios, why would she mention La Llorona?
That's the type of stuff I feel like. Like it's all connected, and it's like you get into it, and all of a sudden it's just brought up. So Riverdale for me. I've been a huge Riverdale fan, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, there's an episode on La Llorona, as we're about to do an episode.
Literally
I'm like,
about to do, yeah.
why Riverdale? Like of all like of all the things, like that seems random to me, but whatever, let's talk about it. So it's just interesting the signs that you see out there when you look for things.
Yeah, so these next two stories that I'm about to tell resonated with me because of my dream. And I feel like the second one's gonna freak Emmy out.
No, why are we ending
for
it
me?
scary?
No, for
Oh.
me. You're gonna be freaked out for me.
Oh, good. Okay.
Rude.
Whew.
Thanks. Thanks a
Rude.
lot. Love you too.
All right, let's hear it.
Okay. So the first one. Okay, so this is another story, and involved who was an outspoken boy who often argued with his mother and his father. After a heated argument, this little boy, along with his brothers, he had two other brothers, they left their ranch in Mexico. They were going along their way. They were visited by a tall woman wearing a black, they called it a black tapelo. I'm thinking it's like the veil, and a black net over her face.
Okay.
Two of the boys were riding in the front of the wagon when the spirit appeared in the seat between them. She was silent and continued to sit there until the little boy, the one who wanted to leave, finally turned the horses around and headed back home. At which time she then said, I will visit you again someday when you argue with your mother. Yeah. So he was arguing with his parents, and she was like, you need to go back home. But I thought that was interesting because she was wearing the black.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
And she was tall, and
Well, I'm just saying, all these scaring children, like, don't go near waters, listen to your parents, be nice to your parents. Like,
this is the Mexican culture. This is a Hispanic culture. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Yep.
Like, this is what I grew up with. Like, the cucuy is gonna get you. Like, there's a boogeyman.
You better behave. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. You get scared. Yep. Okay.
I get it.
Okay, now this one is titled A Bizarre Coincidence of La Llorona. She says, when I was in 7th grade, I had a frightening dream. I saw myself standing on a dark road with the only illumination coming from a dim streetlight. The ground was wet, and in the distance, I could hear the sound of rain falling and the tap, tap, tapping of footsteps coming toward me. Peering into the darkness, I could make out a woman dressed in all black with a dark, lacy veil covering her face, moving towards me. Strangely, as the mysterious woman grew closer, so did the rain. When the woman was about 15 feet in front of me, she looked over my shoulder. When I turned around to see what she was looking at, I saw a young child dressed in a white nightgown playing with a doll in the middle of a puddle of water. When I turned back to her, she was right in front of me. The veil was lifted, her eyes were abnormally wide, and her face was no more than 3 inches away from mine. Her terrifying eyes stared into mine dead on until I awoke in a panic. It was a dream. Yep. I looked toward the window. It was raining. As you can imagine, I didn't sleep for the rest of the night.
Yeah.
Hold on, not done. The next day, I shook off the dream and thought nothing more about it until a year later. On that night, I was spending the night with my friend, who had also invited another friend. In the course of the evening, the other friend, Sarah, who is Hispanic, began to tell us some of the legends and ghost stories of the Mexican culture. When she began to tell the tale of La Llorona, I didn't think anything of it at first. Then she began to tell how the legendary spirit travels by water, dressed in all black or white, and is most always seen wearing a veil. Sarah continued by telling us that La Llorona lifts her veil only to her victims. That in their afterlife, she has chosen them to help her find the bones of her lost children. Now, I constantly wonder if in my afterlife, I will be forced to help her find the bones of her lost children. I have chills all up and down my body. I
Shit.
have chills all up and down my body reading that out
You
loud.
are the chosen one.
Oh, that's why I was like, nope, this is going to freak Emily out for me.
Why?
My whole body got chills, just so you know that, and the listeners know that.
Okay, you didn't watch Riverdale, right? You didn't watch the episode yet?
No.
Okay, watch it.
Okay.
I don't want to spoil it for anybody because
Okay.
it's new too, but I mentioned a few things already, but there is something about like carrying it on and
I'm glad I continued. The article where I got this from, it had lots of stories, and I was just kind of skimming through it. And I'm glad I like sat there and read all of them because I was like,
one.
and this one, I'm glad I saved this one for last because I was like,
But I had a question in that. So your dream, did you go back to sleep? Or was
Yes.
it, you said you didn't look at the time, so you went back to sleep.
I didn't look at the time. Yeah, I woke up, freaked out,
You're like,
felt your
I
hand.
don't even care.
Oh my god, that was scary. I'm not texting Emmy yet. I don't know what time it is, and then I went back to sleep. I was like,
I
it's too
always try
dark.
to go back to sleep to catch the dreams, like to remember what.
Nope, didn't want no more. Did not want no more.
Well, true. Yeah, on some of those. Okay, so on that note, Desi's the chosen one. So I'm not scared anymore because I'm good. It's on you. So
Yep, I read that and I was like, oh shit. We found the answer to what my dream meant. That's what we
no
were
further
trying.
questions.
No further. Yeah, no further questions. Like that's no questions. We're not. Isn't that weird though that I would find that? I'm like, literally, this answered my question.
Yeah.
I mean, when we were
As
trying
much
to find
information that's out there about her, and you find that after you've
yes,
had a dream. But maybe that's not what it means. Maybe
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. All the spooky stuff I like.
that's true. Yeah, you're asking for it.
And we were trying so hard to figure out the meaning of it or what it meant if she was wearing black, which I was like, no, she wears white. But then these stories. Any questions or thoughts after my stories?
Just a lot. But I do have one about the dreams. I think we've talked about this before, but not on here. But do you believe that dreams have meaning or that it could just be a dream?
For someone who doesn't dream very often or doesn't remember her dreams very often, I don't think so. I don't like if I think they mean anything or not. So I don't know. I don't know if it's your subconscious or maybe I'm just always thinking about creepy shit.
I think it has to do
That's
like
what I'm saying.
it is our subconscious and it's something that can't really be explained, but I don't know. I feel like there's a deeper meaning to all stories, whether it's a story that happened in a dream or a story that someone told you in real life. Like, what does it mean? Why is that happening? What causes that? What's the symbolism? Like, that's kind of astrology, is finding the symbolism in
Right. And I mean, and anyone who's listening to this, if you want to email, DM, whatever, like I would like to know what you think my dream meant. If you have any interpretation of your own, like that would be great. If it's not so, it might not be so literal. Like maybe we're being too literal about it by reading the story.
But if she is doomed for all eternity to haunt the waters with La Llorona, and your stories, if you have any La Llorona stories, any thoughts on things we brought up, like how you feel about the stories we told, send us the deets.
Yes, I know a lot of people have a lot of stories about La Llorona. My grandpa was actually telling me about his brother's encounter with her when they were younger. So I feel like a lot of people have stories on her.
But not Emmy in Missouri, so we're going to keep it that way. Got it?
Emmy's like looking around, just so y'all know.
Like looking around
like,
the room, like,
got
if you're
it?
here,
Anybody got it?
please don't
Nope.
be.
Nope.
So, but we do have like rivers around here, and like in my backyard, we were talking about the mosquitoes the other day, and Alex like, well, we're close to water, the river's down there, and then there's like a lake behind on the other side, but at least there's not a lake behind my house. But that was one thing when I watched Friday the 13th movies. We did a binge where it was all of them. Even that weird one where he goes to space. We watched all of them and went outside, and I would laugh. I'm like, this is funny. This isn't even scary. And we went outside on the front porch, and there's a pond behind at my parents' house. There's a pond across the street behind the houses there. And as we were sitting there in the dark, I was like, Jason could be here. I was like,
but I feel like Jason, Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger, like, well, no, they're the classics, but I'm like, to me, like, Annabelle, The Conjuring.
yes,
like
that shit's
that-
scary. Yeah. Oh my God,
that
The Grudge
kind of-
scares me, or The Ring.
Yes,
Like,
yes, you have exorcism movies. You have like all that kind of things.
Yeah.
Like,
No. And that's why I like Scream too, because Scream is one of those really just more realistic ones that it's like, oh yeah, this could happen. Could be someone you know that's just like on a murder spree. Like,
it's for
scary.
fun. Look at his eyes; they look creepy. I can just see it in
I know.
the camera.
I've been looking at Freddy's eyes the whole time we've been talking. Like,
sorry,
I'm not a fan of that.
you're good.
If you
No
see
cuckooing.
something behind me, call the cops and don't tell me.
It was Alec, and I couldn't tell it was Alec. It was like black.
Yeah, I'll confirm if it's him.
Wouldn't that be cool if we had like conjoining nightmares the same night, and we were like fighting evil, like together?
Fighting evil in our dreams.
In the nightmare, I feel like that would be fun.
But I'm gonna tell you, I've never had a dream where I've fought anything. Like, I'm
But
always
you've also never been in a dream with me, so
trapped and dying.
that's
Maybe if you show up in my dreams, I'll be braver.
you will 100%. I have faith.
Let's shoot for it. It's gonna start happening. I'm telling you, connections are gonna come up. I am not. You better go get another.
Did you come back? Did you come back and then leave again?
No. Did you see somebody?
No.
What the fuck? No, you did not. No, I sat here while you went. I sat for a minute and then I left.
Because I was like real quick.
Oh, you might have seen me walk away then. Yeah, because oh my God, if you saw somebody, I'm scared.
No, that's where I was. So I did get a margarita, so we'll see how that works instead of the Moscow Mule.
All right, right on. Feels like a good flow.
You said that, so you recommended, so.
Yeah. Well, I sat here and I was still continuing with the tarot cards.
Cool.
And I feel like I have the second card, the first card, really. I feel like I have it now, so I kind of wrote, and then I was like, ooh, but I still got to pee before she gets back, so then I left. So, do you have any more stories, or?
No, I saved the best for last.
Okay, so.
That's your favorite?
No.
No,
I'm scared. I'm honestly scared. I don't know.
We're fine. Good. You have your rosary. Like, you're good.
I'm sensitive.
No one will get you.
Okay, if you say so.
I get to follow her in the afterlife.
True.
To find bones.
Well, that's what I know.
So I'm going to be an archaeologist.
Together.
Cool.
Cool. Be an archaeologist. That's the message.
Yep. That's my afterlife path. Did you have a favorite story?
Yes, I still think the Riverdale story was my favorite. She didn't do it. Like, it wasn't, she didn't kill her kids. Like, the grief, like the sadness and the grief, I can relate to just the, like, being sad and crying a lot and weeping. Like, that's all relatable. So I just like to think, like, okay. But I do also feel like the cards have kind of, so her throne kind of, to me, looks a little bit like a tombstone. So I thought that was interesting, the thing that she's sitting on. So I was thinking of, with this, honoring the dead. By the time we release this, it will have already happened. But yeah, she died this morning.
Today.
So yes. And I thought it was interesting. I actually got on Twitter after she died just to hear people's stories. And I immediately saw just like hateful things, just people fighting, like people saying stuff about like bad stuff about her. And so to me, I'm like, a woman just died, whether she's a prominent figure or not, died, and we get on the internet and we start arguing with each other about what kind of person she was. I was just thinking about how messed up that was. I feel like I'm just tired of the internet now. I'm just mad. I'm like, I don't even want to see this. I don't want to hear. I don't know anything about the royal family, honestly. Like, it doesn't affect me in any way, but I'm just bothered by speaking ill of the dead and being like, someone died. Let's try to figure out like how we feel about who the person was. And I just thought that was interesting in relation to La Llorona and us talking. And I was like, I felt this real need to honor her and not be disrespectful.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't want to do that. With the Queen of Pentacles reversed, I was thinking a lot about the Queen and just women and the woman archetype and how to like release negative energy. But with the Queen of Pentacles reversed, it's like kind of talking about just releasing negative energy and bad vibes and just being grounded in just like womanhood and I don't know, just being respectful of women in this world. I just felt very strongly about that with this card. See where that one goes. But that's our stalker card. So that's the first card that has come up again. We've already pulled it once. But what I thought was interesting too when we pulled this card, it's like a woman holding what looks like money and it's reversed. So last time we were like, oh, we're going to be poor. And I was just thinking, talking about La Llorona and like a couple of the stories was like, oh, she's a poor woman. And
Yeah.
there's something about that, like the woman part in this card.
Yes.
The other one that took me a minute to get there is,
Okay.
I always get confused with this one. He's hanging upside down. It's the Hanged Man.
Okay.
The Hanged Man, I was thinking about, really what came to me was that there is a space that hangs in the balance of two opposing viewpoints. So I'm thinking a lot about, like I said, about La Llorona and how we're like, she's murdered her children. Evil. This is horrible. But also how it's like, oh, she actually was going through a lot and something happened to her and we don't know what happened. It's really sad. And it's like we can feel sad for her. Same with the Queen, where you can look at her life and you can say she's done some things that were bad and she's been a part of a family that has done some things that were bad. And you can still be sad that a woman died today. Like you can hold two different viewpoints and there's kind of a space between the two viewpoints that's like an awkward teetering of, yeah, I think just holding space for grief. And it kind of is, this card is a reminder to go easy and to slow down because he's hanging upside down, like he's not going anywhere, he's stuck. Like sit in the space between the chaos. And I think of that too with the retrogrades going on right now and how chaotic the world feels, that it's like, just if we just chill out and just hang back, see how things go, it would be a lot better. Like we wouldn't be so stressed. So that's kind of what I'm getting with the Hanged Man. Does that resonate? Make sense?
Yep, it does.
Cool.
I like that though. All right. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this episode. Thanks for listening to the D.E.A.D podcast. Please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok at the D.E.A.D podcast. Also, feel free to send in your stories, episode suggestions, or feedback at thedeadpodcast1@gmail.com. If you enjoyed our show, please rate and review us on whatever platform you are listening on. And be sure to come back next week for a discussion on Mexican Folklore Part 2, El Cucuy.